Thousands of years ago, the Italian peninsula was an untamed wilderness, split among dozens of warring and isolated ancient tribes. Out of this chaos, the Etruscans exerted dominance over the region. They built wealthy, sophisticated settlements that dictated the pace of life for smaller, neighboring groups. These people were mastering complex art and culture, while their neighbors were barely scraping by. The intricate details carved into this terracotta tomb reflect a high level of wealth and societal leisure. Then, in 753 BC, a tiny settlement took root on the banks of the Tiber River. Legend says it was established by twin brothers raised by a wolf, but in reality, early Rome was a fragile collection of huts. The city began its life in a position of weakness. Surrounded by aggressive neighbors with superior technology, the Romans lived in a vacuum of power they were not yet ready to fill. For its first 2 centuries, Rome operated as a small kingdom. The absolute priority was securing its immediate borders and surviving the constant, violent raids from the warring tribes in the surrounding hills. That defensive posture ended when the citizens expelled their final king. Instead of replacing him, they built a new political machine, the Republic. This system dismantled the single ruler. Executive power was split and handed to elected officials, overseen by a network of senators. Distributing authority let society process multiple threats at once, turning a defensive settlement into an aggressive state pushing outward. The men running this machine viewed duty to the state as the highest possible honor. This aesthetic of severe discipline became the engine of expansion. Rome absorbed its neighbors by engineering a political machine that could withstand heavy losses and generate fresh resources at a pace smaller tribes couldn't match. Over centuries, the Republic became so vast that its democratic mechanisms buckled. Power reconsolidated, giving rise to an autocratic empire built for maximum global reach. From Italy, Roman authority spilled outward across the Mediterranean, absorbing millions across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Managing this required a logistical solution, a network of sea routes and highways letting grain, gold, and legions flow from Egypt to Britain. You can see evidence of this reach today. Thousands of miles from the capital, towering stone arches and grid foundations mark the North African landscape. Rome's rise reached its zenith during the Empire phase. A settlement that began as a vulnerable frontier outpost had successfully secured a monopoly over the known world. The physics of empire eventually catch up with every superpower. Defending borders stretching for thousands of miles drained the treasury and exhausted the military. By 476 AD, the structural pressure became fatal, and the Western Roman Empire collapsed under the weight of its own borders. The continent was plunged back into chaos. Without the central anchor of Rome, Italy fractured into isolated, competing city-states that spent the Middle Ages fighting for survival. The massive civic centers that organized millions of lives were abandoned. Grand arenas and temples were stripped of bronze and left to rot. The emperors were dead, and the physical borders were erased. But beneath the dirt and the collapsed stone, the most vital components of Roman civilization endured. The enduring strength of Roman civilization lived within the systems it built to organize human behavior. This legacy is written in highly detailed civic codes. These dense legal frameworks survived the Dark Ages and became the blueprints used to construct modern democratic governance. We also inherited their physical connectivity. Roads layered with stone stretch across the continent to this day, an enduring testament to their permanent infrastructure. The laws, roads, and civic codes created thousands of years ago established a global operating system that modern societies still rely on today.